Hi everyone, welcome to my first video. So I want to get into the book of Ruth, but in order to do that, first we have to know the context of the book of Ruth. Ruth, of course, is in the Old Testament. It seems like a insignificant book. It's really not. It's a creepy book, but it's not insignificant. And I only say it's creepy because a woman half this guy's age goes and lays on the floor of a guy half her age, and then he marries her, and by today's standards, this is just creepy. I mean, like, no one's doing anything wrong, and, like, Jesus loves them, and, like, they were following God's heart, and that's what's important. Whether we put our own perspective on it or not, that's us. Okay, so Ruth takes place about 1000 BC. It was, as it says, written in the time of the Judges. Now, the time of the Judges was a very dark time for Israel. God had put in place certain men, the judges, to help bring Israel out of that. Sometimes they're called deliverers. These judges were not appointed by man. They were appointed spiritually by God. God chose these men, and they were to help Israel turn back to God. It was a very dark time for Israel. They were turning away from God. They weren't following after what He had, their plan for them. It was bad for Israel. But in this time of just betrayal to God and people not believing in God, Ruth, who is not Jewish at all, she's a Gentile, believes in God and follows Him when even His chosen people don't. And so that's why Ruth is so significant. So that's why it's so amazing that this book takes place during this time, that not even the people of God aren't following God. A woman who's not even Jewish, has no claim to Judaism except to who she married, believes in God and follows Him and loves Him, everything she has, and trusts Him. Okay, so now, a cool fact I found out about Ruth while I was studying the book of Ruth, I've been reading some commentaries, is it basically tells us why Jesus was born in Bethlehem. So, the first time Bethlehem is mentioned is in Genesis. Jacob is married to Rachel, and Rachel dies in Bethlehem, and Jacob is at the end of his life, and he's not in Bethlehem, he's in Egypt, and he remembers Bethlehem. He goes back to Bethlehem, and he dies there, and it's not mentioned again until we get to Ruth. Now, just some stuff about the book of Ruth. Naomi is married to Elimelech. Naomi is Ruth's mother-in-law. Naomi's sons are, I'm going to say these wrong. It's Mahlon, it's Mahlon, and Chilion, which is Chillion, which ironically, roughly translates to, sickly, basically. So those are her two sons. And her daughter-in-laws are Orpah and Ruth. Now, unfortunately, Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion all die. And Naomi is just she tells her daughters-in-law, I have no more sons for you to marry. You go, and y'all don't have children, and you go find husbands. And Orpah's okay. She goes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Naomi, but Ruth stays with Naomi. I was no, I'm gonna go with you. She actually says, it's chapter 1, verse 16, but Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following, for where you go, I will go, and lodge where you lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." So she just pledged her life to Naomi, okay? So Naomi goes back to the place of her birth in Elimelech's history. That's Bethlehem. Okay, so Naomi and Ruth go to Bethlehem, and while they're in Bethlehem, Ruth marries Boaz, which we'll get to all that later. So Ruth and Boaz get married. Okay, they have a son. His name's Obed. Obed has a son. His name's Jesse, and Jesse had several sons. One of which is David, as in King David. Okay? So, King David was born in Bethlehem. Okay? This is important because this is like Christ's family tree right here. Okay? So, Boaz, Ruth, Obed, Jesse, David. Okay? So, David, Kings of Israel, Bethlehem's his birthplace. It becomes a pretty cool place. Okay, so Davidic, so just fast forward a few years, and we get to Joseph and Mary. Now, of course, are the parents of Jesus. Joseph is a direct descendant of David. Now, his royal line is completely just not in power anymore. So he's not really important. He doesn't get any oh, you're royalty or anything. He's just a common Joe. But the emperor issues this decree and is like, man, everyone's got to go to the place of their ancestral birth to pay taxes. And since Joseph and Mary are married, they both had to go to Bethlehem because that's the place of Joseph's ancestral birth, King David. Okay? So Joseph and Mary, very pregnant Mary, go back to Bethlehem, and that's where Jesus was born. So, if Ruth had not applied after Naomi, and Naomi had not gone back to the place of her birth, Bethlehem, Ruth hadn't obeyed God and married Boaz, Jesus wouldn't have been born in Bethlehem. It is just so cool. Ruth is such an amazing book anyway. It's just a book of just absolute faith from just so many people, and then you just find out that's where Jesus came from. So just be thinking about just that this week, I guess. And I'll be posting another video soon. We'll be getting into the heart of Ruth.